Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here with another Falconry video. Today's video, I'm going to be talking about vocalization, how to avoid it, how to properly train your birds so they're not vocalizing all the time and driving you insane. It's a good topic, and as actually I was going to do this week based off of some of the comments of last week's video, as I did want to do one on on high-strung accipiters specifically and addressing that. I will do it. It ended up being a more in-depth topic. Every time I sat down and started recording, I'm like, I need to actually put notes up of what I want to cover, otherwise it's going to be way too long. So I promise I will do that. But this week I'm thinking, hey, we're going into spring now. It's a time of year where a lot of people are getting a baby bird, an eyas, right? Whether it's from the wild or whether it's captive bred, it's a time of year where a lot of people are starting to do that, and therefore this is a pertinent topic because when you get a little ball of fluff, and by the way, this video, and yeah, let me kind of back up a little here. Vocalization, a bird making a sound. I'm referring specifically to juvenile birds that are making vocalizations that would normally be directed towards food, parents, that sort of thing. And I'll explain more in a minute, but these are not normal for a bird once they're fledged, hard-penned, and have left their parents. We don't want a bird that is still making these sounds. In fact, we don't want them making those sounds anywhere along the way. It's maddening. It's not good. A lot of the training, if you look at my videos on aggression, a lot of the training techniques that are anti-aggression when training an imprint bird or just a bird from a young age are identical. Some of the same solutions, but still I'm making this as a specific video. And I have decided to, I am writing a book on actually just on aggression because it's such a good topic. So that'll be coming out eventually. But back to the topic at hand, vocalization. There are a lot of great falconry YouTube channels out there. There's a lot of great falconry books. I've written a few falconry books, and a lot of these are geared towards how-to. If you want this result, do this. I like to teach and share from a principle-based standpoint because there is always new ways to learn. There's always new solutions. And if you're given the supposed perfect solution, it might not always work. But if you understand the principle behind it, you can troubleshoot and come up with your own. So that is what I will give some ideas, but I more want you to understand the principle of why on earth would a bird vocalize and how can you fix the problem understanding that principle. So let's think this through. We're talking about young birds. Let's think about them in the wild. Humans, falconry is an odd thing to happen in nature. You know, there's suddenly this convergence of a human and a bird working together. So what's the natural form is in the wild. Bird hatches out of an egg. What is its world? It's got a nest or a ledge. It's got siblings. It's got parents that are bringing its food. It's got parents in the earlier times that are incubating it. This is its world. This is its domain. In nature, vocalization gets attention, and usually you don't want to get attention unless you are declaring something, unless you are defending your territory or trying to attract a mate. Usually you kind of want to be under the radar. You don't want to make a lot of noise. And the vocalizations that baby birds make, not just raptors, even a robin or a sparrow or a finch, these noises are actually bad from a survival standpoint because they do draw potential attention from predators. So that's not good. So why risk it? Why would nature allow such a thing? They have purposes. Now, I'm going to share these purposes as we understand them. I haven't had a conversation with a goshawk that's like, let me tell you why my offspring do this in this way at this time. But it doesn't matter. This is as we understand it right now. So birds have intelligence, but anything reacts to sound. If you hear a sound, you notice it. Your brain goes, register. What was that? Good, bad, or otherwise. You hear an explosion. What was that? Oh, you hear something scary. You hear a shriek. Huh? You turn towards it. You notice it. So think about in the nest, the eggs are laid, a day or two apart each, and they hatch not all on the same day. So there is competition for food. So just about any bird species, including birds of prey, when a parent comes to the nest with food, that is your entry-level vocalization. Is you're sitting there, mom or dad comes to the nest with food, and you start begging for food. Just making a sound at all makes them go, uh-oh, sound, okay? So they're all trying to vocalize to get the attention of the parent, feed me. It's not like some old Disney cartoon where I will perfectly feed each and every bird. They just figure, well, again, I'm personifying them, but just bear with me. Don't rip on it. Just whatever. Just listen to the principle. That's what matters. Parents aren't doling it out evenly. It just kind of normally works out that, the hungrier you are, the more you're going to vocalize and try to push your way forward. As they learn to stand up and move, then they do even more. They learn to put their neck up and scoot their head forward towards the parent. They learn to flap their wings to make motion, because visual attention as well. It's like, I'm making noise, I'm making visual, and the parent's like, okay, that one's loud, here, eat this. You're being loud, here, eat this. And it can also help push your siblings away. It's a very competitive environment for these young birds. This goes further as the birds get older and are branching. Branching is when they're an age where they're starting to hop around the nest or the cliff ledge, and they want to even, if the older birds are going to try to, before older than their younger siblings, are going to try to be closer to mom and dad before. So maybe mom and dad on the way to the nest hear an older sibling screaming for food, and they're like, oh, okay, here. And they get it first. So there is an imperative, an incentive for a baby, an Ias, to be louder, to be much more vocal, much more flamboyant in its motions, and to show intensity. There are biologists who also have documented and submit the possibility that it also can drive urgency. So if you have, if let's say hunting's hard and the parents have not been able to find much food, that the baby's, hunger cries, meh, meh, wailing for food, that can also drive, like, oh, geez, yeah, I really gotta find some food. I can't just sit on my haunches here. My babies are like really getting desperate for food. And it's a big deal as opposed to mammals, because raptors grow ridiculously fast. You go away for a few hours, come back, and you will see their feathers have grown at half an inch. It's like literally it makes an enormous difference if they go too long without a meal during those weeks or months of growth. And so that vocalization is geared towards food, but it's geared towards getting the attention of the parents. And that works in the wild because, as I've talked about when it comes to aggression as well, there is a time when suddenly the parents start to taper off the food. They start to bring maimed prey and drop it near them, and the birds catch it out of the air in many species. And so they're kind of learning how to hunt, learning to direct aggression and attention towards a prey item rather than mom and dad. And eventually mom and dad ditch out. And the babies are like, meh, 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 meh. And eventually they have to like quiet down and go on their own. All the vocalization disappears because mom and dad disappeared. That is the important principle to remember. Now, there are instances, I have to say, where birds that never vocalized can pick it up. Or birds that just based off of hunger, if you have a very young bird, like let's say you get a brancher age bird that has stopped vocalizing in the wild, you're training it, and all of a sudden it's starting to vocalize again when you're getting it down to a good hunting weight. We'll talk about that in a second as well, but that's something that can happen. One of the most obnoxious situations I had a goshawk, a northern goshawk, that was an imprint that I did not train. It was a couple years old, but it had a vocalization problem. I bought it from a breeder friend, had it in my house, and all of a sudden it starts meh, 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 and next thing you know, my perfectly silent imprinted peregrine starts meh, 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 doing peregrine vocalizations, and then my golden eagle, total non-imprint, starts doing eagle vocalizations. And this dumb goshawk got all of my birds in this bad habit of vocalizing, and it's just like, well, this is not good. The best way to deal with vocalization is to address it beforehand. And it's fascinating, that was fascinating to me, that totally unrelated species with radically different vocalizations, it triggered in those other birds the competitive mindset. It's like, dude, you're a trained adult peregrine falcon. We hunt every day, you're fine. You know you don't need to vocalize and food beg, but just the concept of another baby begging for food, they're like, oh, I gotta vocalize too, or else I'm not gonna get food. It's like, yeah, you are, but it's a stimulus response. So how do you properly curve that so that you are not eliciting that response in a bird? That's kind of what I want to talk about today. And if you understand the principle, is your best way to go. So when you are raising your little fluff ball or whatever age you happen to get this baby bird, just remember, you've changed the environment it would have in the wild. Okay, like, you really should keep your baby bird with you all the time, so it's highly socialized. So that's interesting first. Mom and dad leave, and you're never leaving. Okay, well, that can be very bad, too, if you're feeding wrong. But that's the first principle. Do everything you can to have them around people, socializing, and the kinds of things they will be seeing in your falconry world. Your vehicle, your home, your muse, just different things like that. Get them thinking that. You have to remember, if you have them in one spot, or if you have like build a little makeshift nest you're carrying them around with, that is something they can become territorial of. And a territory is something to also vocalize over. It is also something to vocalize in. So in other words, the nest is just a crib. It's not their home. Got a Cooper's hawk with a nest. Okay, well, it's grove of trees the babies will claim. And once they leave the nest, they're still being fed by the parents. They're going to vocalize in that range. So wherever you're ultimately going to keep your bird once the feathers are all the way in, do not raise that bird in that location, wherever it's a part of your house, your mew, whatever. Do not have them there, because just being in that space can elicit vocalizations once they're older and you're starting to fly them. You got to remember that. So you want to take them to their food instead of food to them. They'll probably view you as some sort of parental figure, but if you're like, here's some food, here's some food, here's some food, then you are the parent. And what do you do at a parent? You scream and beg for food from the parent. And what is the parent supposed to do eventually? Leave. You never will. So they're going to scream at you forever. This is a problem. So you need to make situations where you can bring the baby to the food. Where at first, you're learning them to self-eat. Put food on a stick, dangle it above them. So instead of seeing your hand, they see, oh, look, there's some food. They eat it, and then lower it until it's plopped in front of them and they can eat it, and then start a regime where you carry them to a plate, or you can come up with whatever you want, whatever system to bring them to food. So you take them to food, and they can scream at the food all they want. That doesn't matter, because food disappears, appears, disappears, appears. But if it's from you and they see that, you have a problem. So have food in another room on a plate. Carry them on the nest to it. Let them eat there. That way, they understand, I leave the human. The human brings me to a spot where I leave the human, even if it's just a couple inches at first, to acquire food. That is very different than the visual of, my human came to me and handed me food. That says, I'm mom, scream at me. But if you're like, I walk you away to food that you stand on, even as a little fluff ball, and start to eat, that tells them what falconry is going to be. You're going to be riding on my fist. We're walking out in the field, and I'm not your parent. You don't look at me and beg for food on my glove. No, instead, you're out there looking for prey to go hunt after. That is the principle you got to understand, is that you need to do everything to not be bringing food to them, to make sure that is not the visual they have. Ingrain that in your brain. I bring them to food. I bring them somewhere else. They leave me and get food. That's with a baby bird, that is the principle you must do if you don't want to have vocalization and aggression. There's a lot of nuances and exceptions. I'm not talking about the hair. I'm talking about the principle. Now, once you get them flying, you've got a wide range of birds, right? Owls, accipiters, bootios, falcons, eagles, all these different things. There's different. A lot of falcons, if they did start to pick up vocalization, will lose it by flying them. And flying a falcon is a lot different than an accipiter. If you've got a goshawk, you're just walking around, they're on your fist. They're with you the whole time until they go and try to catch something. A falcon is very different. You're going out into open country, you take their hood off, you let them and they take off, and they're going up thousands of feet, circling around. They're not screaming at you, they're huffing and puffing and flying. That's a very different flight than you would have with just a bird you're hunting off the fist. But I prefer to try to do it up front. I prefer to do the training right and make sure that whatever young bird I am raising is not visually thinking of me as a bringer of food, but they are visually thinking of me as a person who comes and is hanging out with them all the time, and then at some point walks them elsewhere, and where they acquire food themselves, walking away from me, jumping away from me, and eventually flying away from me. That is the important principle. I can get more in depth on how-to techniques, but these videos always end up too long anyway, so I just wanted to mostly go over the overarching principle of how you keep a bird raised from a young age from becoming highly vocal. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you find it useful. If you like this channel, you can support me down below, buy some of the merch I have, some of the shirts that are like this. Got, you know, Peregrine Falcon. And let me know down in the comments what other videos you would like to see and what your experience has been with vocalizing birds. And as always, happy hawking.